So, how about the temperature reading? I got some feedback that it seems when I ask questions that I only want to hear good news. In other words, if anybody's struggling, if anybody is stuck, if anybody's going backwards, it sounds as if it's not okay to say that. So I want you to know that when I ask for information or puzzles or complaints or whatever, it's open to bad news too. I mean, it's okay to say, I'm not getting anywhere, or we don't talk to each other since we took this course, or whatever. I may not have the answers today. I may even say, you know, it's a very good idea to combine this with therapy. You know, where it's a good idea to be talking to somebody who can process and work this through, because this is a class. But I know that in this class and with the material we are dealing with, it raises up into the level of awareness lots of feelings and lots of memories that may be difficult, may be upsetting. Hopefully you can talk to your partner about, and hopefully you have a partner who has learned how to listen with empathy, with sympathy, with concern, and just that often can be very helpful, can be healing. But if things are coming up that are not getting dealt with here and can't be dealt with here, then I encourage you to talk to me or call or talk to somebody else who can help you work through it. So, appreciation.
Intuitives, take this and go into this room here and close the doors and take 15 minutes, or I think 10 minutes probably would be enough. Appoint a timekeeper and come back in 10 minutes, and your task is plan a party, and you can do anything you want. So who's an intuitive here? Okay, sensing folks, take this. Okay, let's have the S's up.
Right there.
Here, is this?
Okay.
Okay, and you all are gonna explain this to the group. So,
Joyce.
one or two of you.
I'm volunteering. Okay, this is we decided to have a party.
Okay, and this is the S's, right?
This is the S's, right?
Okay.
Leo and Joyce volunteered to have it at their house, and when we couldn't decide whether to have it inside or outside, it's an in and out party, which means it's going to be both inside and outside. At the same time. Hard luck. No kids. Spouses are optional. But you have to bring them. Optional after you get there. No, that's because there are people in this group here that, don't have spouses. I'm not sure of that. So, everyone's welcome. The kids are not welcome. Don't try to sneak them out. It's going to be Saturday night at 7 on the 23rd of June.
All right, Joyce.
BYOB, BYOF, BYOC.
What's BYOF?
BYOB. Bring your own beer, bring your own food, bring your own companion. Dress is optional.
Come dress or
Depends on the weather, right? Real warm.
This
Don't wear a dress, Bill. You don't have to. Something loose and flowy.
Those are a must. We had a hard time deciding on a theme, so this actually is a theme. Some people said lingerie. Some people said toga party. Some people suggested maybe strip poker, but you know, this dress is optional.
Some people did.
Covers everything, or uncovers everything.
Okay, good. Okay, let's have the intuitives here.
We were having a party that was going to be an intimate party, so it was by invitation only. So we didn't want it to be like open to the world. Dress would be casual but elegant, so we'd all be comfortable. We were going to have really good music and dancing, a really good dance floor. We'd have jazz and Motown and lambada and all kinds of stuff. It would be late afternoon, somewhere around sunset, going into the evening. We would be on the water somewhere, having a gentle breeze. Maybe there'd be volleyball on the beach, water skiing. And then for dinner, we would have lobster and clam bake and champagne and excellent wines and fruits and German beers. And there'd be a veranda with grass and a patio and lanterns. And, there would be perhaps evening sailing if you wanted it, and stargazing. There'd be a hot tub. I didn't get that far. There would be a hot tub on the deck somewhere with clothes optional, and all the logistics would be arranged by a party committee, a group of friends, not us, who have lots of money. Somebody else. And then maybe at the end there would be a bonfire with singing and roasting marshmallows.
Oh, yes, yes. Great. Okay. Of the group that didn't do the test, which group do you think you would have been more likely to be in terms of planning the party? Like S's, how many of you think you would have been with this group? Yeah.
Which party you'd rather go to?
No, that's not the question. It's the process of planning it. Notice that the details of this one, they had everything down: the date, the place. They had everything you need to know, and it would happen.
It was realistic.
Right, very realistic, very realistically oriented. They even talked about appointing officers or something? Yeah, anyway. With this one here, notice that it's more like a brainstorming. Even though this one here has the appearance of some brainstorming, it's in a different category than this type of brainstorming here. One of the significant things about this is notice they said something like, we're going to get a grant, or somebody else will deal with it. Yeah. It's like intuitives, one of their favorite things to say is, we assume funding. And the plans are often grandiose. But when the intuitives say that, the S's just think to themselves, I don't believe it. Where is it going to be?
Plan it.
Somebody else, yes. Somebody else.
Actually, the S's are going to plan
Right,
later.
right.
That was actually an afterthought that we felt like we had to do, but we weren't.
Yeah. Somebody else can take care of those unpleasant details. That's what intuitives would prefer. Notice that things are very out of sequence here. It's very much a brainstorming list. An interesting thing about this is that, I don't know whether you remember, a few weeks ago there was a front page article on the Washington Post about the new budget process that Congress was using, and it said what the directing committee had told them, or the people that designed the process, was instead of thinking about how much money we've got to spend, we're going to go at it a different way this time, and we want you to think about what kind of programs you would like. What kinds of things would you like to do? And then we'll talk about how much money we've got and how we're going to divide it. And one of the quotes in there was one of the people said, "This is the weirdest thing we've ever done." Well, what it was about is the people that were in control of designing the process were intuitives. And so they were looking at the brainstorming, the sky is the limit, and then we'll work back from there. And the sensing folks thought that was a very weird way to do a budget process. What the two types don't realize is both of them would work and both of them would be fun. They just go at them a different way. The intuitives party would happen, but they would scale down their expectations and they would get around sooner or later to dealing with the details, you know, and the fine planning, and they would deal with money and they would make it happen. But this can be very aggravating to the sensing folks. Here was a group of S's, and the task was how to make a drink. Notice the sequence. Sequence often shows up for S's, and if you're an S, think about how important sequence is for you. And if you didn't do this test, think about how important sequence is. Because to intuitives, it is not important. So they said, number one, decide what drink you want to make. Then determine if you know how to make the drink. And if not, find directions. 4, locate ingredients, side trip to store if necessary. Locate the mixing ingredients. Goes right on down here to mix or stir as necessary. Go back to step 8 as needed. Pour into serving container. Yeah, this is wonderful. Here's the intuitive's approach to the same question. Okay. Notice the big thing here is no sequence, no details, very much a brainstorming list. Think of how to make a margarita. You know.
I love that.
Use tequila, but if you don't have it, use whatever you've got and pretend it's tequila.
It doesn't make any difference.
Maybe invent a new drink.
But they'll have a margarita, even if it's not made with tequila. They'll have a margarita. Listen, this stuff, this is one of the big areas of heartburn in relationships. Another quick flyby at this. Another group of S's. Notice how practical, notice how pragmatic. Notice they deal with the money, they have the number of families, they have talked about names and responsibilities for who to do what.
We only had 10 minutes.
Right. This is why I'm showing you these, because we're condensing so much into a short. If y'all had had this amount of time, if you'd have had 20 minutes to do it, you would have produced a long and detailed list. But notice that everything is very specific and very detailed. Here we go. The intuitives at the same workshop came up with a Renaissance party. They decided it's going to be next Saturday and they're going to get the Oatlands. And when they read this out, they're one of the ones that again said, you know, we're just assuming funding. You know, they don't care. They were more interested in the entertainment, you know. Sure, featuring appearance by the Queen, you play by Bill Shakespeare, roast boar, swan, stuffed peacock, jesters and wandering minstrels, lots of cleavage, lots of wenches and wenching, tight hose for the men and cod pieces. Showing you more of the S and N, because the S and N is such a significant thing in the relationship, so it's real important that you know real clearly which of these groups you fall into. Look here, we assume funding. Have a fundraiser garage sale to pay for it or whatever. But they'd work backwards and they would have a party by the time they got through with it. But until they got a chance to do this, They wouldn't be ready to deal with the details. Now, one of the big misunderstandings about Myers-Briggs is if you test out as a sensing or intuitive, you tend to say, oh, I'm a sensing person, or you tend to say, oh, that person's an intuitive. We all do both. And we can go back and forth. In the process of planning a party, for instance, it would be more natural for you to access both than to go back and forth. So when anyone, either a sensing preferring person or an intuitive preferring person, when either one of those types accesses their sensing mode, this is what happens. The data comes in the door, the sensing door, and it has to go through a screen. And a screen is detailed data in proper sequence, past experience that can be trusted. Some of the parties that the S's planned, like the barbecues and whatever, they had done before. They knew it would work. The intuitives don't need to know whether it will work or not. Also, when any of us are in our sensing mode, we trust the practical here and now sense data that we can see, hear, and touch. Anything that doesn't go through that screen gets discarded. Some of the information goes straight into a mixing box here. Some of it goes up into a conscious memory bank. But whatever goes into this memory bank, it has to be dependable data. It has to be validated data. It has to have worked in the past, and they know that they can count on it. In this mixing box, some of this is pulled out. Some of what got through this screen goes in there. And it comes out here as options to be sent on to the decision-making department, which is going to be the T or the F. So this is reconstituted as options to be considered for decisions. So it's gathering the information and organizing it for a decision.
What's the point of the memory bank?
This is the conscious memory bank that you remember what you did in the past or what has worked for somebody else in the past. And so you have a lot of faith in it because somebody did it before, you did it before, and you know it'll work. It's been proven.
So you don't have a tendency to jump off and try something new.
Right. When you're in this sensing mode, and I'm a strong intuitive, but when I'm in the sensing mode, this is what I do. So we all do this. Some of us just have a stronger preference for it than others. Now, when any of us, whether we're sensing preference or intuitive preference, when any of us access the intuitive mode, this is what happens. The information comes in the door. The screen is very simple. It's accept and select only what is of special interest. If it won't get through that screen, it goes into the discard. And a lot of stuff goes into the discard. So that means for an intuitive, when we're in our intuitive mode, if we judge something as boring or we're not really interested in it, it's hard to consider it. So lots of stuff goes in the discard when we're in our intuitive mode. Part of it goes through to this mixing box. Part of it goes up into a memory bank that's untested information. It may come in handy someday, but we don't know how. It's like being somewhere in another state that we never expect to go back to and seeing a Mexican restaurant and remembering it because someday that might come in handy. Or reading stuff, reading articles or stuff. We have no idea why we're reading it because it doesn't connect with anything we're currently interested in, but someday we might be interested in it. So when we are in our intuitive mode, then we gather a whole lot of stuff that we haven't the faintest idea how we're going to use or whether it's going to be useful or whatever. Anyway, the information that we're interested in goes in this mixing box. Some of it will pull out of who knows where up here. Think, maybe we'll try that. Never tried it before, but maybe it'll work for this. But I remember that I gathered that. This is the biggie here. Information stored in the unconscious in the form of metaphor and symbol. This is the biggest difference between S and N. Comes out of here in the form of hunches, in the form of guesses, in the form of an instinctive feeling about what will work or what won't work. goes into this mixing box, new information is created by the mixing, and this is what creativity is all about. For all of us, when we're in a creative mode, this is what's happening. This up here, what's in our unconscious, there's material in there in our unconscious from our own childhood and our own life experiences. There's information in there in terms of the unconscious of our current society. There's information that's in there that's in the unconscious of the species, the human species. So a lot of archetypical stuff is in there. I don't know whether you all have, any of you have seen the Joseph Campbell series or have read any of the stuff around Power of Myth. So there are 3 different types of unconscious information swirling around in there, and they go into that mixing box. So with that new information, then that information is organized as possibilities to be considered by the decision-making department. It's sent on out the door to the T or the F, the decision-making.
Possibilities as compared to what was the
Options.
Okay.
Big word for intuitives. If you hear people talking about the possibilities, and that's a favorite word, you can be pretty sure that you're in the company of an intuitive. I can't stress strongly enough, don't box yourself or anybody completely in one or the other of these boxes, because you do both. But it's almost like a computer. When you access one thing, that's where you are, either by choice or you just automatically do it and aren't really aware that you've slipped over into the intuitive mode. But you can absolutely choose to access your intuitive mode, and also the intuitives can choose to access their sensing mode. And this will relate to your work as couples, because in working on issues in your relationship, you can choose to do one or the other. What often happens in relationships is that the intuitive person will say, I think we ought to do such and such. And the sensing person will say, well, what do you back that up with? What is your thinking on that? And the intuitive person can't provide the backup data, and so they end up feeling like they look foolish, when actually they just simply can't explain where the information came from or where the hunch came from. This plays out in organizations where intuitive people will have a recommendation for what the group should do or what the organization should do, but if the sensing folks pin them to the wall and say, what's your proof for that, or explain your thinking exactly, the intuitive people can't. It's a best guess. It's a hunch. But the same thing happens in relationships. For the sensing folks, they often need to know exactly what's going to happen, and they need to plan, like to plan a vacation or plan a trip as a couple. A sensing person will want to know where they're going, what they're going to do. They're going to want to have the details lined up. They're going to want to know what's happening. The intuitive half of that will say, well, let's just see what happens. Okay, notice sensing is 75% of the population. So the society sends the message that this is the way to be. And of course, this is the way that organizations need for people to be. And so organizations are often heavily S. Only 25% of the population is intuitive. They are both information gathering and organizing processes, both of them. The sensing process is detail-oriented. The intuitive process is big-picture-oriented. Sensing is step-by-step sequencing. Intuition is holistic and out of sequence. Here and now time frame, future-oriented. Sensing, when we're in our sensing mode, we prefer information that can be perceived directly by the 5 senses. When we are in our intuitive mode, we prefer to include information that comes in the form of a hunch, a guess, or etc. The sensing, when we're in our sensing mode, we prefer to trust our own conscious database. When we are in our intuitive mode, we're willing to trust our unconscious database. Doesn't mean that sensors never access their intuitive mode. Doesn't mean intuitives never access their sensing mode. Back to the thing of that I test out, totally N and 0S. For 5 years, I was managing editor of a national 4-color monthly magazine. And I want to tell you folks, that's all about detail and sequencing, here and now time frame, et cetera, et cetera. So just because you test out high or low on the scale, that tells you nothing about whether you access easily. So what I tell folks is, if you test out real high on one end of the scale or the other, don't say to yourself, oh my goodness, I better work it more toward the middle. That's not necessary at all. In fact, I would encourage you to get even more in touch with how strong your preference is and develop your choice to access. So in couple relationships, what you do is again, find out what's going on with the other person. Ask the other person what they need. You know, where are they most comfortable? It gives you a language to talk to each other with. So recognize when one of you has a very strong need for details and for the plans to be pretty exact and pretty realistic, and allow the other one to use their own best function. And the big thing is not to judge it in a negative fashion, not to judge what the other one is doing as wrong. That's when you have one sensing and one intuitive. If both of you are sensing in the relationship, you need to talk about how to work some of this into the relationship. Particularly if you're both S's, develop a little more trust in your hunches and in your intuition and in your own unconscious database. Sometimes sensing folks, if they have a really strong preference, they're spooked by the unconscious, spooked by hunches, and think that it's really air-brained. Also, if both of you are intuitive, then you need to talk a bit about how to get some of this stuff into your decisions or into your planning. Frank and I are both strong intuitives, and how that plays out in our relationship is neither one of us likes to read directions. We much prefer to take a wild guess at how something is supposed to go together, whether it's a bookshelf or how to operate the VCR. We still can't figure out how to record TV programs because you know, we look at the direction booklets and we both just get this terrible feeling of revulsion and close it up, you know. But that means that a lot of things don't get done or don't get done well because we haven't really worked out. What we need is a sensing person in the household to do that for us. That means also sometimes, often, the checkbooks don't get balanced. You know, a lot of things like that don't happen. And luckily, we both think it's hilarious. If we were aggravated by it, it would be a real problem. But I can see where if I were paired with a strong sensing preference person who didn't think that was hilarious, and I didn't think that his way was hilarious, then it could be real trouble. I do think that what a lot of this does is to reduce the aggravation factor in relationships. So instead of finding the other person as wrong, then you just say, oh yeah, you know, that's why you're doing that. And if humor enters into it and you can be really entertained by the other person's style, it really does help. Okay, ordinarily we would break you up at this point and put you into the specific groups and let you talk about how this plays out in your relationships. So y'all are going to have to take the ball and run with it, you know, just during the coming weeks. I'm going to pause for a minute here to talk a little bit about the J and the P because they relate so strongly to these two. With both of these being information gathering, all in the world this means is, do you have a preference for acting as an information gatherer when you're with people at work or in social situations? All this is going to mean is, do you have a preference in social situations for being more of a decision maker, decider, judger, and at work situations? Thinking and feeling. This is a decision-making process. How do you make decisions? These two groups, these were the thinking decision makers, and the question was, what do you do when you hear a baby cry? And what they said, first of all, first thing out of the gate was determine whether it's our baby or someone else's. The rest of the answers depend on the answer to the first question. The second one, cringe. Now, this plays out in every workshop, even when the workshop is made up entirely of women. So this is not an issue. This is not a male-female issue. More women test out as feeling, but this is not a male-female issue on here. Then the third one was block the sound out mentally. 4, go somewhere else. Wonder what's wrong if it continues to go on. Stare at parents to encourage them to take action. Help if it is called for. Speak louder. Remember my sons or daughters. For the feeling decision makers, notice they said pick it up first. Love and hold and talk to it. And that's first out of the gate. Then they start checking. Then they did a quick scan of the room to see if anything unusual was going on. Listen and get a feel for what's happening. Rock. Is it hungry? Try to reassure. If none of the above works, look for what is wrong. May try to divert baby's attention to something else. The big difference on here is these people try to analyze what's going on first, and they'll work down to picking up and cuddling. And that process can take all of 4 seconds to work through to that point. These folks here will usually, the first thing out of the gate will be to pick it up, and they'll work down to analyzing. They'll both do the same thing, but they come at it in 2 different ways. Another group, the T's. Look at the first question. Whose baby is it? Check on him, her for cause. Turn the music up. Talk to it, ignore it. They got to pick it up at this point, which was unusual. Usually this doesn't happen until somewhere down here. Call the police, offer food, cuddle it, rock it. Wake wife up, tell her to take care of it. Wake husband up, play with it, throw toys in the crib.
Sprinkle
Cheerios. Kill the sibling who woke it up. Take it for a walk or a drive. This one here said find it. These are F's. You know, for the F's, the first thing to do was their first inclination is make contact with it. Pick it up, find it, do whatever. Somebody said let it cry, its mother will tend to it. So they evidently talked about that. But then they said pick it up. Anxious because they want to help but don't know what to do, etc. And it worked on down to doing more analysis of what was going on. Here's another group, another workshop of F's. Notice again, pick it up came first, cuddle it, rock it. Then they'd go into the checking, see if it's sick, drive it around in the car, call a friend and ask for advice. They work down. Here's a classic T response to this question. Look here. Who's responsible? Again, that's the same question. Same question. And it depends. If it's me, then there's a whole bunch of different things. If it's not me, then there's, is it an emergency? If there is, act accordingly. If it's not an emergency, stop. If I'm not responsible for it and it's not an emergency, just stop. In a nutshell, know that both will do the same things. They just start at it from the different angles.
So feeling people are more likely to jump in first
Well,
and assess later. And
they're concerned with their feelings. They make the decision based on how they feel about it, and they also factor in the other person's feelings as part of the decision-making process. The thinking folks tend to be more able to bracket feelings in order to get a quality, what they consider to be a quality decision made. The T is a decision-making process. So is making decisions based on feelings. They're both decision-making process. This is not about feeling or emotion or caring, and that's the big misunderstanding. Most people say, "Oh well, he or she is a T, and they don't have any emotions, or they don't care a whole lot." Wrong. A T may or may not have a lot of compassion, may or may not be emotional. Has nothing to do with that. There can be two T's standing side by side. One of them can be very emotional, very feeling, very caring. The other one standing right by the person's side can be very unemotional, very uncaring, very unwarm. The test doesn't tell you anything about warmth, caring, or emotional capacity. All in the world it has to do is what your preferred style of decision making is. So if you hear people at work or whatever talking about the Myers-Briggs, or if you're a T yourself and you hear people make the false assumption that because you're a T you're not a feeling warm person, stop them in their tracks. All in the world it means is that if you're a T, you prefer to make decisions that are logic-based. If you're an F, you prefer to make decisions that are feeling-based. If you're a T, you honor logic above feelings in getting the decision made. If you're an F, you honor feelings above logic. But you can honor both. You can just come at them a little later in the game. This is important. A decision maker can bracket feelings in order to get the decision made. What that means is it's sort of like a battlefield commander. Most battlefield commanders are T's. They have to be. A friend of mine was a Marine colonel that had to make decisions to send people into battle where it was highly likely that they would be killed. And he could do that, but then he came home and wept. And those of us who knew him well knew that. And then when one of his men was killed, he was devastated. But he could bracket his feelings in order to make those difficult decisions. A feeling decision maker would have a hard time doing that. Feeling decision makers have a hard time bracketing feelings in order to get a decision made. The thinking decision makers are objective and can distance themselves somewhat in service of the decision. The feeling decision makers are subjective. They have a hard time distancing themselves in the decision-making process. I test out as an F, and at midlife, the theory says that we start developing our other preferences to a stronger degree. And what I'm lately coming to think about for myself is, in making a lot of decisions for myself and doing so in a very subjective way, a lot of my decisions are affected by some old stuff from childhood or from experiences or whatever. And so there's a lot of personal bias in there. And so now I'm less willing at this point in my life to trust decisions that are feeling-based. So I'm in the process of developing this. So those of you who are at midlife, don't be surprised if you find that happening. In fact, for all of these at midlife, it's part of what midlife crisis is and the developmental task for on into old age is to develop our lesser preferences. So it's an exciting, it's new stuff and it's interesting stuff, lots of stuff to think about. Does not mean that thinking decision makers are not emotional. I can't stress that enough to you. It doesn't mean that the thinking decision makers are deficient in feelings. Some of them are, some of them aren't. We do not mean that feeling decision makers cannot be logical, and we don't mean that feeling decision makers are deficient in logic skills. Often accusations are hurled back and forth around this stuff. It's like, why can't you be logical, or that they'll communicate that this group will communicate that these people are deficient in feelings, and vice versa.
So I want us to begin thinking in terms of the notion that we have many different sides. My picture is, for me, I once made a list of I call them parts of self. And so there can be a part that's very competent, that's out in the world, that's successful, let's say. There can be a part that's very scared. We want to give these parts names. For the sake of identification, for the sake of talking about them, it's good to think of a character that could represent that part. So the scared part, say, for me, might be Little Miss Muffet, who ran away from the spider. Or for me, there was once an overwhelmed part. You know, I have so many children, don't know what to do. What's her name? The old woman who lived in a shoe, okay? I once made a list of my parts, and I got to 22. But I had somebody in this class who probably won the all-time prize. He had 47. 47 disparate, separate characters within himself that he could identify. And what often happens is that whichever one is here, the other one's in the shadow and will undo what this one did. And so I can reach out to you and seemingly be very friendly and very loving and very considerate and very sensitive. And then there's another side that can come in, which is insensitive, blaming, attacking, outrageous. What I'm saying is that we can have parts within ourselves that sabotage the very thing that we say we're trying to do. So that the exercise that I want to start on now, which isn't directly connected to our history, although there can be a connection. I mean, there can be the part of you that was the child growing up in your family, whatever that means. There can be a part of you that's an artist. There can be part of you that's a scientist. There can be part of you that resonates to music. And so if you love Beethoven, you could call that the Beethoven part of you. And if you love Elvis Presley, you could have a part like that. We're all captains of our own ship. And so we want to think about that. And on your ship, you have a motley crew. And there is no telling when you are deciding that you're going to cross the ocean and end up in London, let's say, but you decide to take a nap because you're tired, there's no telling who's going to take the wheel or where your ship is going to end up. So it becomes really important to identify who are the different characters on this ship so that you can decide if by chance you want to take a nap, you get tired, who you want to turn the wheel over to. Because if we're not aware of who's there, at any point in time, whoever takes the wheel could steer for a place that when we wake up, we decide that's not where we wanted to go. So instead of ending up in London, you could end up in, where? Singapore. Yeah. So what I want you each to do now is to take your notebooks and on page, you have a list of names of parts that have been thought of at different times by different people. These are characters. You can add other characters to your list. What I want you to do is to begin to identify at least 8 that you could claim as characters within you. They're what we call your possible parts. I want you to look at the list and begin making a list for yourself. And when you pick a character that feels like, yeah, part of me resonates to that, write down next to it whatever adjectives fit. So that if you happen to pick Mary Sunshine, because she is so cheerful and so positive and always sunshiny, just write that, you know, that that's a part of me. Any questions about this? Steve? Yeah, all your parts, that's right. Identify as much as you can whichever sides you have, even if some of them are in the shadows or they're not active, and don't make them all good ones. Okay? Own that we all have positive and negative sides. We all can be very loving, and we can also be very hateful. So see what you can do about making your list of your parts. Let me tell you, that list is a compilation of many, many lists, but you could come up with your own names. You may have characters that don't fit on there at all, that aren't on there. This is just to sort of jog your thinking.
The adjectives are here, but if we want to put a different
You
character
can put
with the adjective-
different characters. You can put different adjectives. What you really want is to identify the different sides of yourself. There are lots of different things that we do with parts, and so I'm going to do one of them tonight. And as you begin to think in terms of parts, you begin to see yourself in new ways. You begin to become aware, aware of sides that are there that maybe you haven't honored, okay? Aware and maybe accept parts that you haven't accepted, and maybe able to coordinate in ways that you can't when you're not acknowledging them. So we're going to do an exercise with that. I thought I would just start by telling you something that I went through tonight before the class, which was that I'm very aware that tomorrow is this program. I've never done that. I've never spent an hour with somebody who just did a program on Satanism and exorcism. That was today. So I'm thinking about that. And so there is a part of me that's a little nervous about that. And then there's another part that comes in to reassure me, you see, that says, well, you're going to have a lot of friends up there. You're going to have a lot of helpers up there. You're not there alone. You are not alone. So you really don't have to worry about that. So those two parts are interacting with each other. But then there's a third part that thinks it's a big party. And, well, that's my natural child that loves the idea of a party, you see. It's going to be a big celebration. I mean, so many of us are going, and people I haven't seen for years are going. My sister's even going to be there. Sister. So, my only sister, right, who doesn't know what I've said about her at times. And you won't tell her. So there's a part that is very excited about that. And so tonight, somewhere between 5 and 7, I have myself in my office to prepare for our session tonight. I couldn't get myself to think. I couldn't get myself to focus for 2 seconds on what we're doing tonight. And I would say that up to about 10 of 7, there was this struggle going on where the one that was winning was the natural child. The one that was winning was into, oh, that's really exciting, and and what are you going to wear, and who are you going to see, and oh, it's going to be such fun. That part was in charge.
Bring that part in here.
And
Anytime.
I am looking at the clock, you see, and it's 10 of 7. Now, if there was any way that I had, say, Ann Ladd, who used to be here and now is not here, at least not here tonight, could have said, you teach the class, I'm on vacation, you see? But she wasn't here. Or if Bruce wasn't taping this, you see? Or if there was some really, a natural event where we could have canceled the whole class. If there was a possibility, it would have happened. That's right. And so the struggle that was going on inside of me was incredible because in terms of the captain who was steering the ship, the natural child was steering the ship. And so at 10 of 7, somehow or other, I kind of focused on what we're doing tonight. And I tell you kind of because when that part, that natural child is there, my thinking part, my organized thinking, you cover this and then you do that and then you do, that part has no place. I mean, given a contest, that part does not win. The spontaneous, let's have a party part would win. However, reality set in at 10 of 7, and so I, made some notes and did a few things. And so what you see is the result of the struggle where the captain, who says, now look, at 7 o'clock we have a class, and this is what we cover in class number 11, took over and said, the captain took over and said to the child, "Go away. Go, go, not now." And so wherever that is, it's tomorrow. It's not now. But I can tell you that that struggle was not easily won. And so it's the one who watched the clock. And I guess I count on that part. For me, there is a part that comes through often at the very last minute and becomes well organized. I don't even have a name for that part, but the picture I have is someone going through a jungle with a scythe. And what would you call that part? With a machete. I don't have a name. But that part comes in at the last minute, takes over, and gets what needs to be done gets done. And so I guess in a way I could count on that. Like the captain counts on that given a struggle, that part can be brought in and reason will prevail. And so that's what happened for me. That is, at this moment in time, I'm just telling you, the struggle that goes on all the time goes on within us. And then, of course, it goes on between us. So what I wanted to do is show you an exercise that has to do with the struggle that goes on within us, because all of you have at least those parts, and let's see, how many came up with 10 parts? 10.
At least 10?
At least 10, at least 10, at least 10. How about 20? 20. We have some very interesting, rich, varied personalities here. Anybody come up with 25? Yes, wonderful. Okay. 30? Yeah. Okay. Now, what I have found is that, of course, the more parts you have, the more complicated it is to captain your ship. Like, do they take turns? How do you decide who prevails? And sometimes what happens is that your very own parts undermine the thing that consciously you have set out to do. Was anybody aware of that when you were doing your parts, that you had undermining parts? Yes. How many? Yes? Okay. All right. So while you all were in there, I was chatting over here with Chris, who was here, and I said, "You have 4 parts you like and 4 you don't like." And wouldn't you know, she had written down 4 parts she liked and 4 she didn't like. That's exactly what she'd written. So, would you be willing to come and name those parts? So, would you share who you like, okay?
Nana, sensual, abandoned, earthy.
Mm-hmm. Sensual, abandoned, earthy. Okay. The next one?
Thoreau.
Thoreau.
Philosopher, nature lover.
Now, you all see this list. And so, what I want is for a person to represent each of these parts. So we need 8 people who would be willing for a very short time, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, to be here in place of these characters that we're talking about. And so you could volunteer or Chris could choose you. Is there anyone who would like to represent Nana, who's the sensual, abandoned, earthy heroine? This sexy woman. Sexy woman. Do we have a volunteer? So, come on up. Come on up. Okay.
Leave it on.
Okay. And now we want Lady Macbeth. Lady Macbeth, controlling. Okay. We have Miss Ellie, who's worried and intrusive. Do you want to be that? Okay. Mary volunteered. Okay. Miss Ellie. All right. Now, realize that you've got 4 parts that Chris said that she feels good about and she likes, and that's Nana, and that's Thoreau, and that's Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and that's Amelia Earhart. Those are parts of her that she feels happy about. And then there are 4 parts that she knows are also parts of her, but she tends to not feel too good about them. And so there are those that she wants to express and those that she might tend to hide. So we've got Lady Macbeth, and that is Louise. And we've got Superwoman, who is Sue. And we've got John the Baptist, who is Leo. And we've got Miss Ellie, who is Mary. So I want to show you something about what happens with the parts we suppress and the parts that we are willing to express. So the 4 parts that Chris says she doesn't like, I want you to get down on your hands and knees like this. Just like this.
Sorry.
Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's right. Like that. Because those are the suppressed parts. She said stoic, stoic, stoic.
Stoic, Leo.
All right. Now, the 4 parts that Chris says she feels good about are to go and gently sit on the backs of the ones she wants to suppress. So very gently go and sit on, very gently, very gently. I want you to very gently sit. Very gently. Okay. And so now we have the 4 parts that she feels good about that are showing. She's got her sensuality, she's got her philosopher, she's got her poet, and she's got her explorer. They're up on top. And suppressed and somewhat suppressed and downtrodden are her Lady Macbeth, who's controlling, her Superwoman the Rescuer, her stoic John the Baptist, and her very worried, intrusive Miss Ellie. And so that's the way she would like to present herself, with the 4 that are up on top. But what happens when we suppress sides of us is they begin to get restless. And so what happens is that the parts that are suppressed begin to pinch the ones that are sitting on you. Begin to get restless, and the ones who are sitting try to hold your position, and the ones that are suppressed start to move and pinch. And see what happens.
Get the hell out. I'm going to switch with Joyce.
Leave the house. Leave the house. Corduroy.
Okay.
Leave the house. Go get chicken. Leave the house.
Now, what is happening right now? Okay, what's happening for you? What's happening? Let's see. Amelia Earhart, what's happening with your explorer, courageous, determined self?
I mean, the more she pinches, the more I move, but push her back anyway. I mean, I'm not going to let her up.
Okay.
No way.
Okay, so Superwoman is struggling. Is that Superwoman you got there?
Oh, yeah.
To move and get up, or she's moving, but you stay determined and you keep her down. What's happening with you, Superwoman?
Well, I'm trying to get her off,
You're trying to get her off.
one way or the other.
Okay. Okay. Do you think you're going to succeed?
Probably.
Probably. Okay. Now, over here we have Sensuality, who is sitting on Lady Macbeth. What's happening over there?
Well, I think
So what's happening over here?
she almost made me fall,
She almost turned you
but
over.
I struck
Lady Macbeth almost prevailed.
very aggressively pinching and moving, and I almost lost.
So it's hard for you to stay sensual when
Earthy.
earthy and sensual,
That's right.
when Lady Macbeth is getting restless down there, very hard. And Lady Macbeth, what are you feeling?
Well, that I want to be up there, part of that part of her.
Okay, you want to be up.
Yeah.
You don't want to be down.
Yeah.
Okay, and what's happening over here? You are Thoreau. Thoreau.
I have found the stoicism right in his back here. Very tight.
There is a place. There is a place. Yes, and so you're exploring Stoicism.
Well, within a limit. We have boundaries.
Okay. And John the Baptist, what's happening with you?
Remaining stoic. I'll lose my head any moment.
Any moment.
Any moment.
But you're staying stoic.
I'm staying.
And chances are you are going to stay right where you are. So those two actually might continue that way because
Well, actually, when he started pinching me, I thought maybe Lady Macbeth might be better.
you weren't so sure that Stoicism was where you wanted to be.
Look better over there.
Look better. Okay. And so over here we have, let's see, Miss Ellie is down there, and Elizabeth Barrett. And what's happening with your poetry?
Oh, well, love always prevails.
Love prevails.
Love will prevail.
And how is it for you to have Miss Ellie over there, who's getting very distracted and intrusive and worried? How's it going with your poetry?
Oh, we're trying to keep reciting our lines so that we don't get worried.
Okay, all right. So now go ahead and sit back down, and I want the ones on the bottom to get more restless, to get really restless. And let's see what's going to happen. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, what are you going to
Roman Greco.
do? Okay. All right. And what you're seeing is the inner struggle. The inner struggle. There's chaos over there with Stoicism and philosophy. They're rolling on the ground. Sensuality and control are also rolling on the ground. Who's in charge over here? Where is the captain? Who is the captain? Well,
I don't know what's going on.
how does it feel for you to be watching this?
I think it's funny. Well,
Yeah.
under the stress, I mean, it's clear how things can be very explosive and out of control
Mm-hmm. Does that look at all familiar to you?
at times.
At times. Okay. So now I want all those that have been suppressed to manage to get up. I want all of you up. And I want you sort of where you can look at each other. I want you to form a circle, look at each other, and see what that feels like.
Why don't you stay over there?
How does it feel to have all of you,
Right.
actually where you can see each other, acknowledge each other as compared to what was going on down there?
It's better to be balanced.
More even.
It's better to be balanced. Is it better to be up? Better to be even?
More comfortable.
More comfortable. Up here you can see it all. Okay. Do you also all realize that every one of you has some very important strengths? Every one of you. Very important parts.
Especially tip the other one,
Mm-hmm.
or help control the other one from coming up.
Yeah, yeah. Now, how does it feel for you to have all of them up at the same time?
In balance, you know, I can have a sense that it's okay.
It's okay. Okay, so I'm going to put you in the middle of them. I'll put you in the middle.
Then we're going to eat you.
And I want,
Get me? Who said that?
I want and one at a time, I want each of you to reach out and touch Chris and just say who you are for her, and for the parts that she said she didn't like, tell her what's positive about you. So for each one, let's see, starting with Sue, I am your superwoman who
there's a rescuer,
Is-
it can do a lot of different things. Well,
Uh-huh. And I would guess comes through for her.
right, in a pinch and a hard time.
Okay? And hold your hand on her. And go. Now you are.
I'm Amelia Earhart, and I'm your explorer and courageous, and we're determined to get through.
Uh-huh. So stay with her.
And I'm Mara, and I'm the central earthy part, and it's easy for me to get knocked down and get buried by the others. I don't want that to happen because it's a really special part of me. I don't want that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm Lady Macbeth, and I'm the controlling part, the part that keeps all the other parts in part. So I help organize everything.
You're very powerful, and you could either organize or disorganize.
John the Baptist, and I am a believer, and I'm committed, and I follow through with what I say I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah.
Lie down.
I am Thoreau, the nature lover and the philosopher, and I am the one who touches your soul and your heart and makes you feel connected to all things living and to me.
Stay there. Stay there.
I am Miss Ellie, and I am the worried, intrusive one, but I want to make sure that you take care of your children and you take care of yourself. And you watch out for the things that can hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
And I am Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and I represent for you the poetess and romantic love, and I will help you keep the beauty of love and life alive.
Now, close your eyes, Chris, and I want everybody to move in on her. And I want you to feel the reality of all your parts, and that all of them are strengths. All of them are resources. All of them are part of your uniqueness, your beauty, your intellect, your talent, your sensitivity, your survival. Just take that in. And then very gently, I want each one to let go. And Chris, you keep your eyes closed. Everyone to very gently let go and go back to your seats. Now you get to open your eyes. How'd that feel?
That felt great. Good.
Got all your parts in there.
Thanks, that was wonderful.
Welcome. How'd that feel watching it? Let's give Chris and all her parts a hand. Anybody identify with any of these parts? See, we all have different parts, and we all have some parts we look to suppress. And what happens when we suppress them is that they tend to unhinge and unsettle the ones that are up front. And so if we can own them, acknowledge them, respect them, listen, and hear what they're saying, then we can take in what is good, what is a strength, what is a talent, what is a resource, what is a survival. Every one of those parts had a very important place to play in Chris's life. Every one of our parts are there for a reason. They came about because of our uniqueness, of our conditioning, of our decisions. And if we can look at them, own them, acknowledge them, and then decide how we want to coordinate them, then we really become the captains of our ship. But if we don't do that, if we keep them suppressed or we deny them, then at any point in time they get restless and they can overturn what's going on. They can overturn the apple cart. And when that happens, surprising things happen. I mean, you hear in life, all of a sudden, somebody did this or somebody did that. That's not in character. You know, they were never like that. They never said anything. They never showed anything. Well, it's generally a part that has been suppressed says, when is it my turn? I want my turn. I am not going to stay down there any longer. If that part can get up and be heard and speak in their own behalf, then you can know what's there, and within yourself you can acknowledge it and decide what you want to do. And between each other you can acknowledge it. So later on in the course, not tonight, we are going to have a more complete parts party, which is not what I like and don't like, but really the variety of parts. And at another time, we're going to have the parts of him and the parts of her. And that is quite a sight to behold. When you realize that if within me there are 20 parts, say within Chris there are, let's say 20, and with Alan there are probably another 20. And at any point in time, if she has a Nana part, and let's say he has a Thoreau part, which she resonates to, and those two meet, that sounds like a wonderful combination at any point in time. But there are other parts, whereas if Nana and John the Baptist would be another interesting combination, wouldn't it? Or Miss Ellie and Thoreau. And so what happens when we're in one side and we meet our partner who's in another side, and of course, how do we know? If we don't say, if we don't talk, how do we know that, you know, I'm into the playful child and you're into get the job done? What happens? So these are some things that we can begin to think about in more expanded ways, more perceptive ways. What you do in the way of change is you acknowledge, is you accept, yes, indeed, there is this outrageous part of me. You look to see what that part's about, what it's trying to do for you. Usually you can always understand where a part came from, and then see if it's still helpful or it's not helpful, and negotiate within yourself. Like I have, and you've heard me talk, I used to be very shy, okay? And I know it seems strange right now, but there was that part for many years of my life. And it's not that that part has disappeared, but there's this other part that comes out and says to it, within me, you don't have to worry. They're really friends. It's really gone okay before. It's better now. You know, you don't have to do that. So that there's another part of me that comes in and talks to. It's a negotiation that goes on within your own sides, resources. There are different names for this. Your own selves. There's one book that calls them sub-personalities. But I don't like that term. It sounds like subnormal. It's that we are all multiple personalities. It's that we can know about the sides. We can bring them into awareness. We can value what we want to keep. And we can decide what we're going to energize and what we're going to say, you know, your time is later, or your time has been, or you stay here because this one's in the lead. It's the coordination that decides. Does that? You don't throw anyone overboard. You keep what is valuable about that part. And every single part of us has value. Your timidity can be your sensitivity. Your control or manipulation can be your power that can be used positively with other parts. Every single part is a resource that can be used positively depending on how you decide to use it, who you coordinate it with. You see, if we put Lady Macbeth, let's say, who is controlling with sensuality, you would have a very determined, sensual woman, which could be very positive. It depends on how Lady Macbeth is used. You see, Lady Macbeth is very controlling. That's very powerful. Lady Macbeth deciding, modified by sensuality or modified by Thoreau or modified by the poet, can use power in behalf of any of those things, because that's power over there. So every single part of us can be seen as a positive resource depending upon how we coordinate it. The more parts you have that can enjoy each other, respect each other, talk to each other, acknowledge each other, the easier it is.
Those would be the ones in common?
Well, let's say if you have a poet and she has a poet, sure, yeah. If she has an Emily Barrett Browning part, let's say, that needs to be alone to write her poetry, and you turn out to be an extrovert on the scale that we did, and for you to be alone is not a pleasure at all, and so every time she goes away, it feels like a loss, then that's a real problem. I mean, then that has to be able to be talked about, negotiated, that when she needs time alone, it's not against you, and you can use all of your resources to do other things, but it doesn't have to be fused like this, because we all have differences. How we take the differences, what we make of them, whether we see them as a personal rejection of me, or whether this is just that you have these other sides, and when you're into that other side, I can go do something else. So what we're going to do now is go back into the groups of 4 that we were in, and not only fill in your lists of parts, but talk about what you're seeing that you tend to suppress or that may sabotage your other parts. Begin to reflect on that with each other. What happens for me that sabotages something? Or what happens for me when I want to be playful and I'm supposed to be intelligent? What goes on within me? Just talk about that and fill out your list of parts, because after the weekend, we're going to go back to the parts. Okay? Any questions so far?